In the vast expanse of the cosmos, where stars burned like ancient lanterns and nebulae painted the void with colors no human eye could fully comprehend, there existed a kingdom unlike any other. It was not built upon stone or steel but woven from the very fabric of space itself, a realm suspended between dimensions, inhabited by beings who had transcended mortal limitations long before humanity first gazed skyward. This was the dominion of Jaloran, ruled for millennia by its enigmatic monarchs, whose power flowed as naturally as gravity from their connection to the cosmic energies that coursed through their world. At the heart of this dominion stood Princess Lysara, an ethereal figure whose presence commanded both awe and sorrow. She was born under an omen, her arrival heralded by the sudden dimming of 3 suns in her people's tri-star system, an event so rare it was considered sacred. Yet, despite being destined for greatness, Lysara bore a curse darker than the shadow cast by those extinguished stars. She was barren. In a culture where fertility symbolized life's continuity and strength, her inability to conceive marked her as incomplete, flawed, even cursed. Her parents, the Emperor and Empress, shielded her from outright scorn, but whispers slithered through crystalline halls, poisoning celebrations meant to honor her birthright. The title of heirloom princess became a hollow crown atop her head, heavy with unspoken expectations she could never fulfill. Her existence grew lonelier still when diplomatic tensions surged across neighboring systems. A fragile alliance teetered on the brink of collapse, threatening centuries of peace painstakingly maintained by treaties written in starlight. Desperate to salvage what remained of unity among the galaxies, the Emperor made a decision that would ripple through history, a choice steeped in pragmatism yet tinged with cruelty. To secure peace, he decreed that Lysara would be gifted to a foreign dignitary, a gesture intended to bind 2 disparate civilizations together. Not just any dignitary, though. Rumors spoke of a human male from Earth, a planet barely beginning to scratch at the surface of interstellar diplomacy. Humanity's rise had been meteoric, unpredictable, an anomaly among species content to drift along evolutionary tides. Their technology lagged behind more advanced races, yet they possessed something intangible, something dangerous: ambition. They were dreamers, builders, conquerors, all wrapped into one volatile package. And now, one of them would become Lysara's mate. The thought filled her with dread, not because she feared humans themselves, but because she understood the implications of such a union. She would leave everything familiar, the shimmering spires of her home, the lilting melodies sung by celestial winds, and step into a future defined by duty rather than desire. As the day of departure approached, Lysara wandered the palace gardens, her steps silent against pathways lined with luminescent flora. Each bloom pulsed softly, as if echoing the rhythm of her own broken heart. Around her, attendants bustled, preparing garments and artifacts meant to accompany her to her new life. None dared meet her gaze directly, perhaps sensing the weight of her despair. She felt like a relic, carefully packaged and sent away, her worth measured solely by the alliances she might forge. There was no room for protest, no opportunity to refuse. Her role had been decided before she drew her first breath, and now, it seemed, her fate rested in the hands of strangers. The journey to Earth unfolded like a dream too vivid to dismiss. Lysara stood aboard the sleek, obsidian vessel crafted by her people's finest engineers, staring out at the swirling vortex of hyperspace as stars stretched into infinite streaks of light. Her reflection hovered faintly in the glass, pale and ghost-like, a stark contrast to the vibrant hues outside. For days, or perhaps weeks, time lost meaning within the folds of faster-than-life travel. She remained silent, her thoughts a labyrinth she dared not navigate. The enormity of what awaited her loomed larger with each passing moment, pressing down on her chest until breathing itself felt labored. When the ship finally descended through Earth's atmosphere, Lysara experienced sensations entirely alien to her. Gravity pulled at her body with unfamiliar insistence, heavier than the gentle tug of her homeworld. The air smelled strange, carrying traces of soil and moisture mingled with metallic undertones from sprawling cities below. Through the viewport, she glimpsed oceans shimmering under sunlight, vast expanses of greenery interrupted by jagged lines of concrete and steel. It was beautiful in its chaos, raw and untamed compared to the sterile perfection of Jaloran. But beauty did little to ease the knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. Her escort guided her toward a grand assembly hall, where representatives of humanity awaited. Lysara moved with practiced grace, though every step felt like wading through quicksand. The chamber buzzed with murmurs, a cacophony of voices rising and falling in waves. When her gaze swept over the crowd, she found herself searching, not for warmth or kindness, but for recognition. Who among these faces belonged to him? The man chosen to share her fate? And then she saw him. Standing near the center of the room, his posture relaxed yet commanding, was Captain Elias Valen. Unlike many of his peers adorned in formal uniforms or ceremonial robes, he wore simple attire, dark trousers, a fitted jacket, and boots scuffed from use. His features were rugged, his jawline sharp beneath stubble that hinted at impatience or rebellion, or perhaps both. Dark eyes locked onto hers, unreadable but intense, as though he sought to pierce through the layers of composure she clung to so desperately. He didn't bow or offer flowery greetings. Instead, he extended a hand, palm up, in a gesture that was neither submissive nor domineering. It was an invitation, plain and unadorned. Lysara hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. His grip was firm, calloused, grounding. For a fleeting second, she allowed herself to imagine he might understand her plight, see beyond the ornate trappings of diplomacy to the woman standing before him. Yet doubt lingered, whispering cruel reminders of why she was here. Was he truly different from the others who viewed her as a prize, a means to an end? Or was this all simply another layer of pretense, another step in a dance choreographed by powers far greater than either of them? Elias led her to a private chamber, away from prying eyes and hushed speculation. As the door sealed shut behind them, Lysara braced herself for what came next. Would he demand answers about her barrenness? Offer condolences laced with thinly veiled disappointment? Instead, he surprised her. "You don't have to speak," he said, his voice low and steady. "Not unless you want to." His words carried no obligation, no expectation, and for the first time since leaving Jaloran, she felt something akin to relief. Relief, and, perhaps, the faintest flicker of hope. Days turned into weeks, and Lysara began to settle into the rhythm of her new life on Earth. The human habitat was chaotic and confounding, yet strangely comforting in its imperfections. The towering structures of glass and metal reached skyward, defying nature with audacious determination, while streets teemed with people moving with purpose, laughter ringing out amidst the hum of engines and chatter. At first, Lysara observed it all from a distance, perched beside Elias in their shared quarters high above the cityscape. She watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, and marveled at how fleeting daylight seemed compared to the eternal glow of Jaloran's trisuns. Here, darkness fell swiftly, cloaking the world in shadows that whispered secrets she couldn't yet decipher. Elias proved to be an enigma, much like the planet he called home. He wasn't overtly affectionate, nor did he attempt to impose himself upon her. Instead, he gave her space, respecting the boundaries she instinctively erected around herself. Yet, there were moments when his presence softened, revealing glimpses of vulnerability she hadn't anticipated. Late at night, when the city quieted and the stars peeked through gaps in the smoggy veil, he would sit beside her, speaking of his childhood on Earth, a tale of hardship and resilience that resonated deeply within her. He spoke of loss, of dreams abandoned and rebuilt, and in those stories, Lysara found fragments of her own pain reflected back at her. Slowly, tentatively, she began to share pieces of herself as well, weaving tales of her luminous homeland and the weight of her barrenness. To her astonishment, Elias listened without judgment, his gaze unwavering, his silence a balm rather than a barrier. Their bond deepened in ways neither had foreseen. What began as a pragmatic arrangement evolved into something more profound, though neither dared name it aloud. Lysara discovered joy in the simplest of interactions, watching Elias prepare meals using ingredients alien to her palate, marveling at the way his hands moved with precision and care. She learned to appreciate the quirks of human behavior, finding humor in their tendency to express emotions so openly, even when it left them exposed. In turn, Elias seemed captivated by her otherworldly grace, often pausing mid-conversation to study her as though memorizing every detail. There was reverence in his gaze, but also curiosity, a yearning to understand the woman behind the title of princess. Yet, beneath the surface of their growing connection lay a tension neither could ignore. Lysara knew the truth of her condition weighed heavily on Elias, even if he never voiced it. She saw it in the way his shoulders stiffened when diplomats visited, asking pointed questions about heirs and legacies. She felt it in the rare moments when his optimism faltered, replaced by a shadow of doubt she recognized all too well. Despite his efforts to shield her from scrutiny, the pressure mounted, a relentless tide threatening to erode the fragile foundation they had built together. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the glittering sprawl of the city, Elias broke the silence. Do you think there's a chance?" His voice was hesitant, almost fragile, as though afraid of shattering the illusion they had created. Lysara turned to face him, her heart aching with the weight of his question. She wanted to reassure him, to offer promises she couldn't keep. But honesty rooted her in place. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "My people believed my barrenness was absolute. Perhaps your science can find answers where there's failed." Her words hung between them, fragile threads of possibility tangled with the harsh reality of uncertainty. For a moment, Elias simply stared at her, his expression inscrutable. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a small, crooked smile that didn't quite reach his eyes but held enough warmth to thaw the chills settling in her chest. "We'll figure it out," he said, his tone resolute. "Together." And though fear still lingered in the corners of her mind, Lysara allowed herself to believe, however fleetingly, that maybe they could defy the odds stacked against them. Months passed, and the seasons shifted around them, bringing with them changes both subtle and profound. Lysara adapted to Earth's rhythms, learning to navigate its complexities while holding tightly to the traditions of her people. She found solace in rituals brought from Jaloran, meditative dances performed under the moonlight, intricate patterns etched into glowing crystals that pulsed with energy only she could channel. These practices grounded her, offering a tether to the world she had left behind. Yet, as time went on, she realized they also served another purpose. They bridged the gap between her and Elias, creating moments of shared understanding where words often fell short. Elias, too, embraced parts of her heritage with an openness that surprised her. Though initially skeptical of her spiritual customs, he soon joined her during ceremonies, sitting quietly as she chanted ancient hymns or traced symbols in the air with luminous threads of light. His presence lent a new dimension to these acts, transforming them from solitary expressions of identity into something communal, something alive. On occasion, he would ask questions, gentle, thoughtful inquiries that revealed his genuine interest in her culture. "What does this symbol mean?" he'd ask, pointing to a glyph hovering before them. Or, "Why do you always face east when you begin?" Each query opened a door, inviting her to share not just explanations but memories, stories, fragments of who she was beneath the title of princess. Their relationship deepened further as they explored one another's worlds, blending elements of both into a tapestry uniquely theirs. One afternoon, Elias took her to a bustling market, guiding her through stalls bursting with colorful produce and handmade crafts. He introduced her to flavors she had never encountered, spices that danced on her tongue, fruits that exploded with sweetness. In return, she taught him to cook dishes from Jaloran, dishes infused with stardust and essence, their aromas filling their quarters with scents that seemed to transcend mere food. Together, they laughed over failed attempts and celebrated small victories, building a life rich with shared experiences. But alongside these moments of harmony came challenges that tested the strength of their bond. Diplomatic pressures intensified as factions within both their peoples questioned the legitimacy of their union. Rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by those who saw their pairing as a liability rather than a bridge. Some accused Elias of harboring ulterior motives, suggesting he sought to exploit Lysara's royal status for personal gain. Others whispered that Lysara had been discarded by her own kind, her barrenness rendering her unfit for leadership. The accusations stung, cutting deeper than either cared to admit. Through it all, they leaned on each other, drawing strength from the connection they had forged. When public appearances became unbearable, they retreated to private sanctuaries, finding refuge in quiet conversations and stolen glances. They defended one another fiercely, Elias silencing detractors with sharp words and Lysara countering skepticism with unwavering dignity. Their love, though unspoken, became a shield against the storm raging around them. Still, doubts lingered in the recesses of their minds. Could their union withstand the weight of expectation? Would their differences ultimately drive them apart, or had they truly found common ground upon which to build a future? These questions haunted them, lingering in the silences between words and the spaces between touches. Yet, amid the uncertainty, there remained a spark, a stubborn, defiant hope that refused to be extinguished. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Lysara noticed the change one morning as she prepared for the day ahead. Her reflection in the mirror appeared unchanged, yet something within her felt different. A warmth radiated from deep inside, unfamiliar yet strangely comforting. At first, she dismissed it as a trick of her imagination, a fleeting sensation born of fatigue or stress. But as the days unfolded, the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing sunrise. Elias observed the transformation too, though he said nothing at first. His eyes followed her movements with increased attentiveness, noting how she carried herself with a newfound grace, her steps lighter, her gestures more fluid. There was a glow about her, an ethereal quality that seemed to emanate from within rather than reflect external light. It reminded him of the way stars burned brighter before supernovae, their brilliance signaling both creation and destruction. He wondered if this shift marked the beginning of something monumental, or the unraveling of everything they had built together. The realization struck Lysara one evening as she sat alone in their quarters, tracing constellations onto a blank wall with her fingertips. The patterns shimmered and danced, responding to her touch in ways they never had before. She placed a hand over her abdomen, feeling the warmth pulse beneath her palm. A surge of emotion overwhelmed her, joy, fear, disbelief, all colliding in a tempestuous whirlwind. Tears welled in her eyes as the truth settled over her like a mantle. She was no longer barren. Life stirred within her, tentative but undeniable, a miracle defying logic and expectation. Summoning every ounce of courage, she sought out Elias. He stood on the balcony, gazing at the city lights below, his silhouette framed by the fading twilight. "Elias," she called softly, her voice trembling. He turned, concern etched into his features as he took in her tear-streaked face. Without hesitation, he crossed the distance between them, pulling her close. "What is it?" he asked, his tone urgent yet gentle. She hesitated, the words caught in her throat. How could she explain what she barely understood herself? Finally, she whispered, "I feel something. Something I thought impossible." She guided his hand to rest where hers had been moments earlier, pressing it against her stomach. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Elias froze, his breath hitching as he felt it, a faint vibration, a whisper of life pulsing beneath his fingers. His eyes widened, searching hers for confirmation. "Is this?" he began, unable to finish the question. Lysara nodded, tears streaming freely now. "Yes," she breathed. "It's happening." Neither spoke for a long moment, the enormity of the revelation hanging thick in the air. An heir, an impossible heir, was growing within her, a living testament to the bond they had nurtured despite overwhelming odds. Yet, even as elation swelled in their chests, a shadow crept along the edges of their joy. What did this mean for their future? For the fragile peace they had worked so hard to maintain? The child represented hope, yes, but also uncertainty, danger, and unforeseen consequences. News of Lysara's pregnancy rippled outward like shockwaves, reaching ears eager to interpret its significance. Among the first to react were the diplomats and emissaries who had once dismissed her as a relic of failed alliances. Now, their tones shifted, dripping with calculated enthusiasm as they scrambled to align themselves with the burgeoning symbol of unity. Gifts poured in from distant planets and human territories alike, ornate cradles carved from rare metals, garments spun from fibers imbued with protective enchantments, scrolls bearing blessings written in languages older than time itself. Yet, beneath the veneer of celebration lurked agendas hidden in plain sight. To some, the unborn child represented salvation, a beacon of cooperation between humanity and the dominion of Jaloran. To others, it was a pawn in a game of galactic chess, its potential influence already being plotted and maneuvered before its first breath. Within the confines of their quarters, Elias and Lysara grappled with the weight of these expectations. Each knock at their door brought fresh demands, meetings to attend, declarations to draft, appearances to make. The couple found themselves paraded before audiences hungry for reassurance, their every interaction dissected for signs of stability or discord. Reporters clamored for interviews, their questions probing and invasive. "How does it feel to carry the future of two worlds?" one asked, her microphone thrust inches from Lysara's face. Another pressed Elias, "Will your child inherit leadership roles, or will you relinquish control to traditional hierarchies?" The barrage left them drained, their private sanctuary feeling less like a refuge and more like a fortress under siege. Yet, the scrutiny wasn't confined to external forces. Within their own ranks, dissent simmered. Members of Elias's military faction voiced concerns about prioritizing alien interests over human autonomy, while Jaloran nobles whispered of diluting royal bloodlines with human genetics. Both sides eyed the couple with suspicion, questioning whether their bond was strong enough to weather the storms ahead. Even allies who claimed to support them hedged their bets, hedging phrases like, "if all goes well," and "barring unforeseen complications," into conversations that should have been celebratory. Amidst the chaos, Lysara wrestled with doubts that gnawed at her resolve. She had spent her entire life defined by her barrenness, ostracized for a flaw she could not change. Now, suddenly thrust into the role of mother-to-be, she questioned whether she was ready, or even capable, of fulfilling such monumental responsibilities. The child growing within her was a miracle, yes, but also a burden laden with expectations she feared she might fail to meet. Nights were restless, plagued by visions of failure. Ceremonies disrupted, treaties crumbling, her child torn between worlds unable to claim either fully. Elias noticed the strain etched into her features, the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was watching. He tried to reassure her, reminding her of their shared strength, but even his words sometimes faltered under the weight of uncertainty. For Elias, the challenge lay in reconciling his dual roles as protector and partner. As a soldier accustomed to decisive action, he struggled with the ambiguity of their situation. Every decision felt like walking a tightrope, balancing the needs of his people against the desires of Lysara's. Should they prioritize Earth's security protocols or adhere to Jaloran's ceremonial traditions? How could they ensure the child's safety without isolating it from the cultures that shaped its existence? These questions haunted him, keeping him awake long after Lysara drifted into uneasy sleep. More than once, he found himself pacing the balcony, staring at the horizon as if searching for answers written in the stars. Despite the mounting pressures, moments of clarity pierced through the fog of anxiety. Late one evening, as Lysara rested her head against Elias's shoulder, they shared a rare laugh over a clumsy attempt to assemble a crib delivered from Jaloran. The instructions, written in an archaic dialect neither fully understood, resulted in a lopsided frame that wobbled precariously. "Maybe we're doing this wrong," Elias joked, trying to steady the structure. Lysara smirked, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Or maybe it's supposed to lean," she teased. "Perhaps leaning is the Jaloran way." Their laughter echoed softly in the quiet room, a reminder that amidst the chaos, they still had each other. Such moments, fleeting though they were, anchored them. They became lifelines, pulling them back whenever the currents of expectation threatened to sweep them away. Still, the path ahead remained uncertain, fraught with challenges neither could fully anticipate. The child growing within Lysara was a promise of hope, but also a harbinger of trials yet to come, a paradox they would need to navigate together, step by precarious step. As the days stretched into weeks, the weight of their circumstances pressed harder upon Elias and Lysara. The initial euphoria of the pregnancy announcement had given way to a relentless tide of obligations, each more demanding than the last. Diplomatic summits consumed their mornings, requiring them to stand side by side as leaders negotiated terms that hinged on the symbolic value of their unborn child. Afternoons were filled with cultural exchanges, ceremonies designed to demonstrate unity but often devolving into thinly veiled power plays. By evening, they returned to their quarters exhausted, the quiet sanctuary offering little reprieve from the scrutiny that followed them everywhere. Lysara bore the physical toll of her condition with stoic grace, though the strain showed in the dark circles beneath her eyes and the way her hands occasionally trembled when she reached for a cup of tea. Her body, attuned to the cosmic energies of Jaloran, reacted unpredictably to Earth's environment, amplifying the usual symptoms of pregnancy. Waves of nausea struck without warning, leaving her doubled over and gasping for breath. Yet, she refused to complain, fearing that any sign of weakness would fuel the doubters who already questioned her ability to carry this child to term. Elias noticed, of course, he always did, but his offers of help were met with polite refusals. "I must endure this," she told him once, her voice soft but resolute. "For both our sakes." Elias, too, carried burdens that weighed heavily on his shoulders. As a representative of humanity, he faced increasing pressure to assert dominance in their partnership, lest Earth appear subordinate in the eyes of intergalactic observers. Military advisors urged him to establish clear boundaries, insisting that allowing Lysara's customs to take precedence undermined human sovereignty. Meanwhile, pacifist factions accused him of exploiting her vulnerability, claiming his acceptance of her pregnancy was merely a ploy to legitimize Earth's stake in galactic politics. Caught between these opposing forces, Elias struggled to maintain equilibrium, his decisions scrutinized at every turn. Their nights became battlegrounds of unspoken fears and simmering frustrations. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly now stumbled over landmines of unresolved tension. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of negotiations, Elias snapped at Lysara for dismissing a suggestion from Earth's medical team. "You can't keep shutting them out," he exclaimed, his voice rising despite his efforts to remain calm. "They're trying to help." Lysara's eyes flashed with hurt, her own temper flaring in response. "Help? Or control?" she shot back. "Would they understand if I told them my body is connected to energies they cannot comprehend? That their machines and tests are meaningless against forces older than their species?" The argument escalated, each word a brick added to the wall growing between them. For the first time, Elias questioned whether their love was enough to sustain them through the trials ahead. He loved Lysara fiercely, but the chasm of misunderstanding yawned wider with each passing day. Was it fair to ask her to abandon pieces of herself for the sake of diplomacy? And was he willing to sacrifice his principles to appease those who demanded conformity? The breaking point came during a state banquet hosted in their honor. Dressed in regal attire that felt more like armor than clothing, they navigated a sea of smiling faces and insincere congratulations. Midway through the evening, a prominent ambassador from Jaloran cornered Lysara, his tone condescending as he questioned her adherence to tradition. "Your Highness, surely you realize the importance of raising the child according to our customs," he said, his words dripping with thinly veiled criticism. "To do otherwise would be unacceptable." Lysara stiffened, her jaw tightening as she fought to maintain composure. Before she could respond, Elias stepped forward, his presence commanding. "With all due respect," he said, his voice cold and clipped, "the child will be raised with respect for both its heritages. Anything less would dishonor its origins." The ambassador's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly, bowing slightly before retreating into the crowd. Though the confrontation ended there, the damage was done. As they left the banquet hall, neither spoke, the air between them thick with unspoken grievances. Back in their quarters, the silence was deafening. Lysara sank onto the edge of their bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Elias paced the room, running a hand through his hair as he wrestled with the torrent of emotions swirling inside him. Finally, he stopped, turning to face her. "We can't keep doing this," he said, his voice raw with desperation. "We're tearing ourselves apart trying to please everyone else. What about us, Lysara? What about what we want?" Tears welled in her eyes, spilling silently down her cheeks. "I don't know anymore," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to be what they need me to be without losing myself completely." Elias knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Then we'll figure it out together," he said, his tone firm yet tender. "Whatever happens, we'll face it as one. No matter what they say, no matter what they expect, we'll protect each other. And this child." For a moment, the walls crumbled, and they clung to each other, drawing strength from the bond that had carried them this far. But as they held one another in the dim light of their quarters, the specter of uncertainty loomed large. The road ahead was fraught with challenges they could scarcely imagine, and the choices they made would shape not only their lives but the destiny of two worlds. In the quiet aftermath of their embrace, a fragile peace settled between them, though the storm outside still raged. Lysara rested her forehead against Elias's, her breath trembling as she whispered, "We cannot control what comes next, but we can choose how we face it." He nodded, his grip on her hands firm, unyielding. Together, they stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the city sprawled beneath them, its lights flickering like stars in the darkness. The child within her stirred, a gentle reminder of the life they had created against all odds. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, echoing the uncertainty of their path. Yet, for the first time in weeks, they stood united, resolute. Whatever trials awaited, they would meet them not as two fractured souls but as one. And in that moment, amidst chaos and doubt, hope burned brighter than fear. The future remained unwritten, But together, they vowed to shape it, not for others, but for themselves and the legacy they would leave behind.